Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another webinar here on the Society of Photographers Facebook page and members group. Great to be back with another webinar. Coming from a sunny Rill today. It's absolutely boiling out there. And today we're joined by Colin from PermaJet. How are we doing, Colin?
Very well, thank you, Colin. Yeah, two Collins on screen. How rare is that?
What have they done to deserve this? It's brilliant to get you on board. We've been working certainly with you and the PermaJet team for many years. So it's great to get you on to do one of these webinars and do something that we haven't really covered in any kind of depth at all. We do in the magazine, as you know, where Mike likes his papers, but in terms of the webinars, we've not done much on paper and the choices out there. And I know PermaJet have a fantastic range of products out there. So it's going to be interesting to hear the differences and everything, what differences paper choice can make to the final look and feel of the image. Yeah,
certainly. I mean, from our point of view, or from my point of view, the presentation I'm going to be giving you in a few minutes is one that I give to camera clubs when we do what we call the print to perfection evening. And that's an evening where we come along to I come along to a camera club with a printer and members' images and show them the difference that a different paper can make to the image. It's a popular evening, it's very interactive, and it gives people the opportunity to try something that they've never seen before. Because typically people tend to just stick with what they know works well, maybe, Oyster or a PhotoSpeed product, Hanamula. I mean, what I'm going to talk about this afternoon applies to any paper range, not just PermaJet, but it's just that this is one talk that I do give. So it's very good for members to understand, well, what can a paper do? Now, unfortunately, because we're doing this on video, you can't really appreciate the different textures that we have in our range, the different base tints. That's something that the members will have to just do themselves. Or, as we were just talking off air, when we can get back into a live environment of trade shows or at the NEC, come along to our stand and then actually feel the weight of the papers, the texture, and how it can affect the different images. So, I think we're going to be about half an hour today. I'm sure you're going to have some questions, hopefully, that I can answer.
There's plenty of people logging on. So I was just going to say, if you've got any questions, as Colin mentioned, going through, then please type them in the comments. And if Colin's talking about a certain aspect of the paper, then I can fire them at him straight away. If not, I'll hold on to the questions and we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions going along, please do drop them in the comments and we'll be glad to answer them as we go through. Okay. But are you happy to get the presentation up?
I think so. No, just bear with me, as we did have some technical issues earlier on, but hopefully we're resolved now.
We're not going to have any today. So I can see quite a few members are already dropping in where they're watching from. What we do like to see is where everyone's kind of tuning in from. So, while you're in the comments, say hello, say where you're watching from, and let us know. Yeah, so I'm going to drop you into the presentation now. I'll probably just hide myself while you're going through the presentation, so there's no kind of background clutter. And then if there's any questions, I will pop in and ask them. We've already had one. In fact, let's go straight into this one. So Pete Evans is asking, any printers do you recommend for home printing?
All right, okay. I mean, I will be talking about printers later on in the presentation, but I can cover that now. Typically, we sell both Epson and the Canon range. We are a silver reseller for Canon. So we favor the Pro 100, the Pro 10 and the Pro 1000. Also, we have in the past sold Epson printers. I mean, we are still selling them. We've just received yesterday the new Epson SureColor P700, which we're just currently putting through its paces in terms of profiles for our media, so we can have them uploaded for those people who have bought a P700. So we have no particular favorite apart from that, as I say, maybe the Canon, because we have a close relationship with them in terms of being a silver reseller. But if people are looking at buying a printer, what we tend to say to people is you need to look at one that's got at least 6, if not more, colors inside the machine, because the more colors you've got, the wider the color gamut that you can achieve when printing. But we appreciate that not everyone can afford maybe a 700 or a 600 or a 500 pound printer. But what PermaJet can do for you is, even if you've got a very more basic printer, like an Expressions, Epson Expression, for example, which may be only a 4-color or a 5-color, we can still, with our custom profiling service, hopefully get you where you need to be in terms of the quality. So we're happy to talk to people on the phone if they wish to have a conversation about printers. Does that cover the answer? Yeah,
it covers it perfectly. Some good advice in there. There was another question, which I'm sure you're going to no doubt cover in quite detail. I'm just trying to find it now, but I'll pop it in just so you're aware of it. Steve is asking, are there any particular types of characteristics of paper that you would consider when printing fine art, old master style images?
Right. Okay. I mean, if people can see what we've got on screen at the moment,
let's see if
typically, I don't know if they can see the presentation first screen.
Yeah, I've just brought that up now for you.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think that question you just asked is really part of what you can see there. I mean, the most common question we get asked is, and I might as well start my presentation now and go through it, because I think I'll cover that answer now at the first bit. I mean, the most common question we get asked is, what paper would you recommend for? And that could be landscape, it could be portraiture or sport. The issue we face with that kind of a question is, it's not actually our image, it's not my image, and it's hard for us to try and say, well, what look or what feel are you wanting to achieve with your final print? So on the fine art side of things, there's two different families of papers, which I'm going to come to later on. Which, are you looking for a matte effect using a matte paper, or are you wanting to use a texture, have it textured to try and increase the look and feel of an image? For example, when I do the Camera Club talks, typically I get an image, and I joke about this, but I get an image of like a red squirrel. But when you print that on the RCR Museum Heritage, which is a subtly textured paper, it kind of brings life to the fur. And the same with birds. It kind of gives a 3D effect to like the plumage. But if you're looking at old masters type things, some people are trying to achieve maybe what an old painting looks like. Then you might go for a more smoother image, or you might go for a slightly warmer base. And in the PermaJet range of papers, there are different warm, base tints, from a very cold, bright white to a neutral and down to like a more warm. So it's not easy for us to say, oh, you should do that. What we can do is maybe give you guidance, which is what this talk will hopefully give you something. Does that kind of answer, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that kind of answers it well. So yeah, brilliant. Perfect. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just crack on then. So as we say, because it's not our image, it's always hard to try and give guidance. But what we can do is give some pointers. And some people will bring along a mobile phone to, say, an event, a trade show, and show me some images. And based on what we can see, we can give our point of view, what we feel may well suit. But it's never easy, because we're not really in that person's head and not looking for what they want to achieve. So we can give guidance. The key thing to remember is that there's no right or wrong paper choice. I mean, people sometimes consider that maybe as a little bit of a cop-out. But because we don't know what you're looking for, it's easier really for you to try and see what suits your images best. So what we say is, yes, there's no right or wrong paper choice, only one that gives you a print that you are happy with. Because ultimately, and when you get to the last slide, that's what this is about. When that print comes off your machine, are you happy with what you've got? And if you have, then that's great. That's all it needs to be. So that's what we have to try and guide people with. And as I go through this slide, I'll go on to the next page now. The choice of paper is very personal, because it's down to you as an individual what you think would suit your kind of images. And I talk about there being a marriage between the image and the paper. And what I mean by that is that not every combination will work. And it could be that the image isn't quite right. It might be something to do with the exposure or the framing, the composition doesn't quite seem to gel right. And that's not generally, always the paper's fault. But if it's not right, then maybe look at changing the paper, because maybe you want something a little bit warmer, maybe a bit colder. Maybe you feel that, yes, a texture will help. And these are questions that only the actual person themselves can really ask and try out. And as I said before, in the PermaJet range, we've got papers that go from a warm, what we call a warm tone, not overly warm, but a subtle warm, to a more neutral, if that's the kind of thing, or cold. And if you're looking at maybe printing monochromes or color, that can certainly sway what kind of paper you want. Now, from my personal point of view, if I'm doing portraits, I tend to favor a more warm-based paper. So, for example, that might be our smooth pearl or our gold silk. Those base tints are subtly warmer and they accentuate the skin tones. So that's when I would kind of favor that kind of a paper. Now, when I'm looking at a cold paper, I'm typically using that for monochromes. And prior to joining PermaJet 9 years ago, I did 28 years at Ilford on the monochrome black and white side. And I'm very used to seeing very cold black and white monochrome images. So I will tend to favor a colder paper. And that would be things like photo luster, FB distinction, or portrait white, because that's the kind of black and whites I like. But some people much prefer a more neutral or warm tone. And then we have got papers that can service those needs. So there's some things to consider. And don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to try new paper. Now, people might be interested as they're looking at my presentation about the next line here, which says, do not be swayed away from trying a paper by the opinion of friends or peers. And where that one came from is about 2-3 years ago at the photography show. I got asked by a gentleman what paper I would recommend for some images that he had. And he showed me the images on his mobile phone. And they were of fireworks, close-up fireworks in the sky with a very black sky. Now, in my opinion, they would have looked stunning on our titanium luster paper, which is a metallic-based paper, which is superb if you've got vibrant images or glass or, you know, like architecture. And I thought, yeah, great, that will look superb. So told him what the deal was, and he was going to go for a pack of A3. And as I filled out the form and I'd got his paperwork ready and the paper in the bag, his money was in his hand. And his friend came over and said, what are you buying, Bob? He said, oh, I'm getting some of this titanium. And his mate went, oh, I don't like that. Oh, don't you? Oh, I better not buy it then. And I watched his money walk off down the aisle at the NEC. Now, in my opinion, those images would have looked stunning on the titanium luster. Now, hopefully he came back and bought it. But, you know, it's okay to be asked by advice to say, oh, I think that image will look good on that. But if someone's had a bad experience or doesn't like a paper, still give it a try, because it might suit you as an individual. And that's the key thing here. It really is very personal. So what we kind of say is, don't be afraid to try something totally different. It's the only way you can see. A lot of people, and bless them, you know, say, oh, I print everything on oyster or on a gloss. That's great, but you might be missing a trick. Your images might well suit a textured paper or a fine art paper or a matte paper, and you'll see it in a totally different light. And that's, you know, going back to when I was saying before about doing the camera club talks, that gives people an opportunity to try at PermaJet's expense, because I supply the paper and the inks, to try something different. So, well, look, based on what I'm seeing of your image on screen, I think it would suit A, B, or C. I then print it out on that paper, and I go through things like profiling and media settings, which is a different talk than today. And then they can see and compare the two. So they'll see what they would normally produce versus what I feel it suits. And the number of times people go, wow, I never even thought of trying that paper. And there's one particular paper in our portfolio, which is a particular favorite of mine. It's called Photo Art Silk. Now, it's a fine art paper, classed as giclée quality because of the nature of its how it's produced and its base and coating technology. But it's got a sheen to it. And even though it's what we call a matte paper, if you've got images like time lapse on a waterfall or a stream, or one I saw was a gentleman who did an exhibition down in Cornwall, which you'll appreciate this, Colin, because he spent a day with the RNLI and he had images of them going through the spray on the boat and whatever, and the spray just looked alive on photo art silk, and they're absolutely stunning. And I favour that paper a lot because I think it's an unsung hero of ours, and it brings a certain life to an image that maybe people haven't appreciated before. So try something different. Now, if you're not too sure, then what we do, and our competitors do as well, we offer test packs. And what they do is give you the opportunity to try and try different papers within that family. Now, PermaJet have 3 families. We have what we call digital photo, which is your everyday type of oyster, gloss, titaniums. We've got the new titanium gloss that we launched back in March as well. You've got matte, and you've got ultra pearl, smooth gloss. Now, they have varying image tones differences, but they are what we call everyday weight papers. So they're up to about 270, 280 gram. And they are compatible with any make of printer and type of printer. Because when they get onto my next screen, some people may have restrictions on what papers they can use. We then have a second family of papers, which is, we're moving into the fine art range now. And this is the fiber-based baryta range. And what that means, and a lot of people will see the phrase baryta and think, well, what's that all about? Well, what it means is that the coating or the base has some element of what we call barium sulfate, which is a chemical which makes the paper base and the emulsion acid-free. So it gives you this archival stability of, when Epsom say things like over 100 years. I mean, with the Epsom P700, I think they're now quoting 300 years in certain storage conditions with on paper and ink. So the fiber-based baryta range is basically to give you the look and feel of the old wet darkroom fiber-based papers, but with the convenience of inkjet. And you've got a matte paper there. You've got neutral tone papers like Royal Gloss. Then you've got the bright white of FB Distinction. So in that family, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for like a gloss satin look, but fine art quality, then it's test pack 2. In test pack 3, you're then looking at our cotton rag papers, and that is smooth and textured fine art. And there's a bit wider range in that. But again, you've got very smooth papers like Alpha and Omega. Alpha is what we call optical brightener free. And optical brighteners is a chemical put into base to increase the base white. So you've got the range from Alpha with nothing into portrait white, which is very white indeed. And then you've got textured papers, things like museum, gallery etching, and artistic watercolor. So sometimes it's go and have a try, and I think that's the kind of family that I'm looking for. Then give it a go. I mean, Colin, you're going to be giving out a promo code. I don't know if it's on screen at the moment, but we are going to be running for the next 2 weeks a promotion on PermaJet, 15% off, and that includes test packs. So if you're looking to try something different, then please, have a look at maybe the test packs. They are a great way of, I say, dipping your toe in the PermaJet media waters. And, I appreciate that other people, not everyone's PermaJet, and other manufacturers do offer test packs as well. So that's the things to try and consider and to maybe understand. Now, when you're choosing your paper as well, make sure, ideally, if your printer supports it, matte papers should ideally use matte black ink. And certainly if you're looking at a printer like the Pro 10, Pro 100, the Epsom 600, 800 series, then they will have a photo black and a matte black. And the photo black is designed to work on glossy and satin luster type finishes. And matte papers take the matte black. The ink formulation is fundamentally different. Now, on certain paper, certainly on the Epsom range before the P700 and 900 were launched this month, you had to switch on the Epsom printers between a matte black and a photo black, and that wasted ink because you were dumping it into your waste pads. Their new printers don't. They've got individual print heads. So some people didn't want to switch because it wasted ink. So they used photo black on everything. And you can use photo black on a matte paper, but be careful. If you've got areas of density, it might show what we call mottling because the ink's not really sitting right. But if you've only got fine text areas with black, you'll get away with it. So best results, matte papers should use matte black ink. Also, we strongly recommend the use of custom profiles. We want to make sure that people are getting a maximum quality from their paper choice. And we offer a generic profile on websites for the vast majority of printers. And what I'm doing after I finish this presentation, I'm continuing to profile the new Epson P700 so that on our papers, so that we can put them onto our website, our generic profile. So anyone who's purchased or going to purchase a P700 or a 900 and are using PermaJet papers can access a generic profile as a starting point. However, if you're using a generic profile, and to be honest, Colin, the colour management side is a whole different presentation to give.
Yeah, we'll try and get you back on to do one of them.
On to do one of those, yes. But ideally, using a custom profile means that we are ensuring you're using the right amount of ink and creating the right colours for your ink, paper and media combination. And it doesn't have to be a Canon or an Epson. We will profile for any printer. It's a free service if it's on PermaJet paper, but we do charge if it's a non-PermaJet paper. And information on that is on our website under the ICC profiling section. But we strongly recommend custom profiles because it means you're more likely to get a first-time print, and that saves you time and money. And we know that ink and paper isn't cheap, and to waste a lot of sheets trying to get it right, a lot of the time custom profiling will certainly reduce those costs. So that's the best way of getting the best from your paper choice. Another thing to consider, and I've had this as feedback, I mentioned that we do some heavy textured papers, and that's typically gallery etching and artistic watercolor. And when we do your trade shows, Colin, and on other places at the NEC, and when I go to my camera clubs, I'm only showing A4 print, and that's purely because space is restrictive. I'd love to be able to have A2 prints because that's what really sells an image, is the size. The bigger, the better. But as you know, in some of your venues, if I was something, I'd need about 8 tables to lay out all my papers. I think we've got 28 at the moment. So we print on A4 so you can get a look and a feel of what the texture would look like. But on a small print, the texture can look to overpower the image because you see the texture first before the image. Think big. And a lot of people will print on A3 or A3 plus. It's certainly in the camera club market. And your viewing distance goes back. So up A4, you're up close. A3, you're going. A3, a bit further back. And the bigger the image, then the more that the image overpowers the texture and they complement each other. But I've just heard people say, oh, I don't like that. That's a bit too harsh. Well, think big. And at the NEC, we can show big images, but not always when I'm doing smaller venues. Now, other things to consider when choosing the right paper is your printer. Certain printers can't handle heavy, thick, fine art papers. And that's typically some things like the Expressions range. They're classed as a photo printer, like the Brother range or Lexmark or the smaller Canons. But really, they're designed for word processing and maybe just digital photo weight. So our digital Test Pack 1 would certainly work in that. But when you're moving into the fiber-based range or the cotton rag range, you're going up to 300, 310 gram. But also, they're stiffer. So the actual transport through some of the smaller printers, it's too acute for the transport to handle. And then you might get head strikes or it just doesn't process at all. So unfortunately, some people may be restricted on what printers they have. So if you can afford it, and it's easy for me to sit here and say you need to buy a Canon Pro 10 or an Epson P700. Typically, though, the more you invest in your printer, one, you're going to get more inks. So the P700, I think, is 10 inks now, as is the Pro 10. The more inks you've got, the wider the colour gamut that you can achieve in your prints. It makes them smoother grade ranges, so you've got less clumping maybe or blocking between image tones. But also, typically, the running cost of the more expensive printers is cheaper. So, for example, on the Canon range, we sell the 8750, which is list price £199. Now, it's got small cartridges, but they're, I think they're, crikey, maybe about 10 mil. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're roughly about £1.80 per mil to replenish, to buy new ones. The Pro 1000, which is 80 mil cartridges, so like a bottle, 50, 60p. So a third of the price, but it is an 800, 900 pound printer. So if you are looking, we would always say, if you can afford it, the bigger, the better, because overall your return on investment via your ink usage will be far cheaper. Does that make sense? I hope, Colin, that I've explained that, but it's a thing to consider.
Yeah. Makes sense completely.
Yeah. But it's easy, as I say, it's easy for me to say when I'm not spending the money. But please bear that in mind, because on the smaller printers, I think the Pro 100 or the Pro 10, by the time you've filled that about twice full of cartridges, you've paid the same amount of money for your launch of a Pro 1000 and its first set of 80 mil inks. But it's the investment at the time people have to consider. And finally, as I said at the start of this, that is the key thing. The final print must give you pleasure. You must be happy with the result you're getting, regardless of whether other people don't like your paper choice. I mean, I did a camera club about, crikey, it must be about 3 or 4 years ago now. And it's somewhere in the Cotswolds, I think. And the week before, the camera club had a visiting print judge. And everyone had come in with 3 or 4 prints to be judged. And apparently he stood at the front at the start and says, "Before I begin, can I just say that I don't like glossy papers?" Now, 3 people in that audience that night had printed on gloss, and they felt we shouldn't have bothered turning up now. Now, in my opinion, that's wrong. Yes, you can say, I think it would look better on an oyster or a matte or whatever, but be critical maybe of the composition or the fact, you've not touched out something or an error like that. But in my opinion, the paper choice is very much down to the individual, and therefore to say something like that, I personally think is wrong. So that's the presentation. I'm just going to come out of this now, Colin, hopefully, and not lose you.
No, you are here, and we are back again as a duo.
There we go.
So yeah,
I hope that was clear for everyone.
Yeah, no, a really good presentation, and as I said when we first kind of joined in, it's something that we extensively cover in the magazine, or Mike does, to be fair to him, but not something we've done through the webinar. So it's good to get your perspective on it, and we've got quite a few questions, so we will rattle through them now. So obviously people were listening and digesting, because plenty of questions coming up. So first of all, we'll go to David Shortland, who says, "I have a Canon IP8750 using Canon inks. How accurate are your generic profiles for this model, as I tend to get a green cast on occasions? Would a custom profile solve this, as when printer manage color, the results are good?"
Okay, right. The 8750 is a cracking little printer, and I must admit I was using it initially when I went around the camera clubs, because for £199, I mean, it was brilliant. The gentleman's mentioning the fact he's getting a green cast. I'm wondering whether that's with monochrome images, because from PermaJet's point of view, if someone's looking to buy a printer and they're doing monochromes, we can't recommend the 8750, because it's basically like 2 blacks. It hasn't got the light grays, it hasn't got the capabilities to print a very good neutral monochrome. It's a shame, because it's a lovely little printer. Color, brilliant, superb. Now, yes, if you're getting a green cast, typically they are, as I say, on monochromes, and a custom profile will tend to eliminate it as much as possible. But in brief, if the Photoshop is managing the colors, for example, the profile is made up of more or less equal quantities of all the inks that you've got. So you're still going to be using your yellow, magentas, your cyans as well to help create the blacks and the midtones. If you go to something like, and we recommend certainly on the Epson range, using the advanced black and white setting, because that's a driver written by Epson, and what it does, it kind of still uses a little bit of the colors, but favors more the blacks and the light blacks and the light blacks. So you're less likely to see it. So on the 8750, it's not uncommon, certainly on monochromes, to get a greenish cast. A custom profile can help remove that. And it can be paper dependent, because the coatings that we use and our competitors use, some are more likely to show a cast than others, and they typically are maybe the satin and the glosses, because they're like what we call a microporous coating. So the technology is different to that used on the fine art range. So that sometimes also can cause it or show a cast, and a different paper won't.
Right. Okay. I mean, David just commented to say it is the color images that he's got the green cast on. So in other words, it's a custom profile could help, and also check the paper stock. Yeah,
certainly. I mean, if he hasn't got any custom profiles, if he's used generic, I mean, we've been Canon now for about 18 months as one of their resellers, and what we've found certainly with the Canon range of printers is our generic profiles are very good printer to printer, but not in all cases. Now, Epson themselves say that printers can have up to 10% differential on print performance. No. And we've noticed that in the past. We once bought two P800s at the same time because we generate our own swatches for the global market. One was going to be set up for photo black and one for matte black, so that we didn't keep switching between the two. Now, we installed the first printer, profiled it, ran all the patches, perfect. When we initialized the second printer and then just tried the profiles on that printer, they weren't good, and we had to re-profile the second printer for all our papers. So on the server, we had left and right, because we're very original, where the printers, it was either the left one or the right one, and you had to make sure you chose the right profile, because they varied so much in their performance. But a custom profile in a lot of cases will improve or eliminate a cast.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thanks for that. We'll jump on to the next question. From Richard Wilson, is there such a thing as a set of backgrounds or presets that can be loaded into Lightroom such that we could load an image and we might get at least a feel as to what a paper might look like for a specific image? Or am I imagining something that is not possible or practical?
I think Richard's answered the question in his last statement there, to be honest. I know where Richard's coming from, because we also have the option of soft proofing, where some people will use soft proofing in Photoshop, for example. Forgive me, I'm not overly familiar with Lightroom. I just work on Photoshop. But we get people asking, and it's a similar question, say, is about soft proofing. Soft proofing is a good idea. However, it's very dependent on, one, that you've got your monitor calibrated correctly, that your viewing conditions are controlled, that you haven't got extraneous light onto your screen, and that you're using a custom profile that you've loaded for your particular paper. And yes, they can give an indication, but you have to remember that you're comparing two technologies. You've got RGB light transmission from your screen versus CMYK reflective light. So they can sometimes give you an idea. Ultimately, the only true test is to print it off and see, are you happy with it?
Brilliant. I think that flows quite nicely into the next question, which I think you probably answered within that, is, do you find that processing programs that allow you to soft proof your image prior to printing help or not? And do you think they are very accurate in rendering the paper on the screen? So I think that's kind of covered within.
Yeah, I think really the previous one has kind of covered that.
Kind of.
There's one view. It's a nice to have. We would always favour the print being the final arbiter of whether it's a good image or not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the test packs come in handy, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing we got here. That's the test pack, for example, that we have. And it's got a different range of papers in there, so you get a number of sheets to try.
Brilliant. Alistair Brown was just asking a quick question if this is going to be available to watch later, which it is. It will be available on our public Facebook page within the videos tab. If you are a member, you can go on the scites.net/webinars, and it will be on there along with all the other webinars that we've recorded over the last couple of months. And if you're a member of the Facebook group, so that's a members only Facebook group, then of course it's within the units tab. So yeah, it's all in there. So next question is from Elaine. Hi, both of you. How do you decide whether to use a gloss or matte for your images, please?
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's really down to yourself. It's whether the look and feel of your final image you want to have gloss or matte. Now, something that I've not mentioned, which was asked by a gentleman who was doing click and collect in our warehouse last week. He was doing some images and he's going to put them behind glass. So he said, should I use gloss paper? And our advice is no, don't use gloss behind glass, because you effectively can get double reflection. Oh, right. So we recommend him to either use a luster finish, which he chose oyster, or a matte paper. But what can happen with a matte paper is that it can take a little bit of the saturation out of the colours, but you maintain them with gloss, oyster, or satin type papers. So really, do you want a gloss? It's one of those questions that I can't really answer, because I don't know what you particularly like or feel. But how are you going to display the image? Is it going to be in an album? Is it going to be behind glass? That could determine which way you go in terms of a paper choice.
Brilliant. So the next one is Alistair Brown. It is saying, are there profiles available for non-branded ink types, i.e. Cartridge World?
We don't list generic profiles for those, for non-OEM brands. However, if you're using a PermaJet paper and you're using Cartridge World, not a problem. We will profile. The profile service is free regardless of the ink type. It's as long as on PermaJet paper. If it's non-PermaJet paper, then we will offer a charge. But no, the amount of different inks out there, it just wouldn't be possible for us to be able to create generics for everything. But we will custom profile.
Cool. Dave is asking, I actually found that generic profile worked better than the custom one, despite following the instructions very carefully. Would it be worth doing them again?
Quite possibly. That's not uncommon for some reasons. It's how it happens. I must admit, I couldn't answer the question as to why that is the case. We've had it on a few occasions, not many in the 9 years that I've been here. Generally, in the vast majority of cases, the custom profile is an improvement upon the generic or equal to. The fact is, to Dave, if the generic works better, then fine, then use a generic. What we're trying to do is just making sure that you've got a system in place that gets you where you need to be, which is that the final result is what you're happy with. And if it's the generic that's working better than the custom, then fine, you've got a system that's working.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Next one. We've got a few questions today, dear me. Steve is asking, I have a Canon Pixma TS6250. Is this good enough to do photo prints on?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any reservations about using any of the Canon Pixma range at all. As I said, it's probably at the lower end of the price range, but that doesn't mean it's any less quality. I'm not overly familiar with the 6250. It might be that the number of inks in there might restrict your color gamut, but yeah, fine, not a problem.
Brilliant. Sorry, I'm just flicking through because there's quite a few different comments and questions. I'm just trying to make sure that we get through them all. So Darren is saying, I have failed in competitions with print quality and poor paper choice, image looking flat. I mainly shoot monochrome using a Canon Pro 2000. I sit hours going through test packs before choosing which I think is the correct paper. But to the judges, it's the wrong choice. How do we overcome this?
Change the judge. Maybe. This is the thing. I've heard it before, that where judges have said it's not suited. Again, because judges have an opinion and things that they like to see. That I've witnessed myself, and I thought, oh right, no, I really would have thought it would have suited that there. That's why I say it's very individual, and for judges to say it's the wrong choice, that's purely, to be honest, only in their opinion. If you're happy with what you're creating on those papers, then carry on. Personally, and if you're selling images and you're able to sell and your clients buy them, then again, that's proof in the pudding, isn't it, really? Well, you're saying about images looking flat. What you can do, we tend to see flatter images more on matte type papers, and you can tweak the saturation a little bit in Photoshop to try and give it what we call a cosmetic lift, or the brightness. You're not fundamentally affecting the colors, but typically if they're looking flat, maybe just look at either a brighter base tint paper to give you that extra lift rather than a neutral. And certainly you can see that when you do a comparison print on, say, in the fine art pack on, say, something like portrait rag versus portrait white, where they're very different white points. One will have a little bit more pizzazz about it than the other one. But that's the best one I can think on that one.
Brilliant. Sorry about that. I was just getting something set up here, because the next question is, sorry about that. Kevin is asking, wishing to support shops, local shops. Are your resellers still listed on your website?
Yes, we do indeed. We have a dealer locator or reseller locator on our website. There we go. Where to buy?
I've just put it up on screen. So it's www.permajet.com, and then there's where to buy. But if you just go onto the PermaJet website, it's under the dealers tab on the main menu. So yeah.
Sorry, Colin. Unfortunately, the issue we face is having, or the availability of people on the high street that we can actually sell into. So typically most photo dealers on the within the UK will stock PermaJet, hopefully anyway. I look after, if you draw a line from Aberystwyth past Cambridge down to Ipswich, I look after all points north of that, including Scotland. And in most, in Manchester, we have places, in Leeds, Hull. Unfortunately, we've just lost our reseller in Sunderland because Charles Eagles has closed down. So part of the restrictions we face is actually the availability of a retailer who is willing to stock paper. And not every day, these days, there's not as many photo centres out there that there used to be when I was a rep back in the 90s for Ilford.
That's very true. Very true. Next one is from Ken. Ken is asking, are profiles accurate across platforms, i.e. if I print the same file using Photoshop or Capture One, would the results be the same?
I don't see why there would be any difference, to be honest. As long as the profile is there, then there shouldn't be any issues. We've not used Capture One, to be honest. We tend to just focus on Photoshop within the business. We have got people using Capture One with profiles, and we've got people at the moment using, I think it's called Affinity as well. We've had no issues whatsoever with the quality of the images produced.
Awesome. I think this is probably going to be your last question. Another one off Richard. So since getting my printer and some papers from you at the Society's event earlier this year, I got a PermaJet test pack from David Keep, who was doing a talk at a club event, and he later talked to me about those choices. These obviously promoted his own favourite and most used papers. Do you put these packs together for other PermaJet promoting photographers and have them available to try out if we like the style of one particular photographic artist or another?
Right, okay. Not I'm aware of. I mean, certainly we have done some test packs with the likes of Damien McGillicuddy and I think Lisa Beanie in the past. I mean, if the gentleman there is looking for a particular paper, then we do have the test pack 1, 2, and 3. What we tend to do sometimes is with some of our ambassadors is if they're doing a number of events and they've got particular, because what sometimes and I think Colin, we did it at the SWPP in January, is that we had a smaller test pack which had key papers from each of the 3 families. So rather than it being a digital, as I said, we've got digital photo, barometer, and fine art. They're 3 individual test packs. What we have at times is put together one which has maybe 2 papers from each, just so people have a flavour of different, without having to buy all 3 test packs. But they're generally just run at main events like the NEC or your convention.
Yeah, perfect. Right, I think that's probably all the questions caught up with. And a massive thank you for joining us today. Just one last shout out. Just again, the code SWP1520 will give you 15% off PermaJet papers and test packs. So if you want to try anything out over the next couple of weeks, then you can use that code to get 15% off. The PermaJet website is where the code's valid from. So I think that's about all we needed, or all we had planned to cover today, and lots of great questions coming in. I'm sure if you've got any more questions, the PermaJet team will be more than happy to answer them via their normal channels. Obviously, their website is www.permajet.com, so you can ask them any questions via the normal channels on that. So thank you very much for joining us today, Colin. It's been really interesting, and obviously I can tell by the amount of questions and comments that we've had come in that it's been a really informative webinar for our members and something they're really keen to explore. So I hope lots of members bombard you with a few test packs over the next couple of days. I think the code lasts for about 2 weeks, is it?
About 2 weeks. Yeah, I think it's a week on Friday. I think the 10th of July is the end date for that code. But yeah, as you've said, Colin, if anyone's got any questions or wants advice, either email into us at permajet.com or give us a call. The office hours are, 9 till 5. Not a problem.
Yeah. And they're a very good, friendly team, so they'll be happy to answer any questions in the office. We've got to keep Colin busy doing something anyway.
Well, exactly. I can't go and visit clients at the moment, Colin. So, I'm off this stage for the foreseeable future. Brilliant.
And we will hopefully try and get you on to do maybe one of those colour management webinars, because I know, again, that's another thing that we kind of like talk about quite a bit, about getting a color calibrated system right from capture to print. So that would be an interesting one for our members to join in again. So we will definitely put a date in the diary for that. But thank you very much for joining us. Loads of people are saying thank you on there. Please give the video a like, or the webinar a like, to let us know that you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Give the PermaJet Facebook page a like as well while we're at it, so they know that we've sent some people over. But for now, we'll be back with our next webinar on Tuesday night, I think, at 7 o'clock with Gary Hill and Mark Baber from Sony. So that'll be fantastic. So that's Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Until then, take care and stay safe, everyone. Cheers. Cheers, Colin.
Okay. Bye-bye now. Thank you.